And I'll put it in the notes for today, but you can also go on the website and click under schedule. You can see it under flyers and publicity, or you can see it just listed under schedule, Women Healing Women Intensive. And so several ladies have asked me to do this, so here you go. And then I will do it. Pre-registration is required. It's going to be the last week of September and the first week of October. Now, I know that when we've done previous online intensives, we have stretched it out like 10 weeks or 14 weeks or whatever, just 3 or 4 hours a week. What I'm going to do, and I know it's intense, it's going to be intense for me too. I guess that's why they call it an intensive. It's going to be for 2 weeks, and we'll do Saturday and Sunday, 3 hours, both of those days. And then an hour and a half to 2 hours each evening during the week. So it's going to be a total of 32 hours. And anyway, the information, all the details, what it covers, and what comes with it is all on the website under schedules and under Women Healing Women Intensive. And so if you are ready to make a commitment to do that, that's several months out. And what I'm doing, just as a way of explanation, is that our next grandchild will have been born by then, Lincoln. And so right after, he's only going to be like 3 or 4 weeks old, but they are planning, Ryan and Gabby and Aria and Lincoln are going to go on a 2-week vacation. So that's going to free up 2 weeks of time can devote for preparing and teaching and doing all those things. So I am squishing it into 2 weeks. You know, stretching it out for 10 weeks or whatever afterwards. It's going to be, you know, with 2 babies here, Lincoln and Aria. For me, that would just be a challenge. So if you're willing to put those hours in, it's just 2 weeks, and you can do it. So anyway, I need you to commit to it so I can firm it up. The last week of September, first week of October. And like I said, all the information is online under schedule and under Women Healing Women. So that's what I have to offer, and I'm going to welcome Michael.
What an awesome opportunity. I can remember many years ago, I was in a Native American camp, and they were doing a women's sweat, and I questioned the discrimination aspect of excluding men, and they actually let me go into the sweat. And it was an interesting space, an interesting time. So this, I would like to be a fly on the wall, and maybe for some, but I will be able to be, but that'll be awesome, sweetie. I'll look forward to seeing that unfold and the transformation it'll make for you in you as well as in everybody who chooses to attend. So that's pretty exciting. Congratulations. And do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
Nobody has a hand up, and nothing's going on in the chat room. Let me flip over. I think we have answered all the questions that I have received by email. Let me just double check real quick. Yes, I don't have any out there that we have not addressed. Cool. So, okay. So maybe you can get back to the Enlightenment.
Yeah, let's go back to Enlightenment. And as we had said earlier, there are several words which were left in what Dan McDougall chose to call their original dignity in the Aramaic language, rather than trying to find a word in English that would substitute, because the concepts are so different in Aramaic that people who've substituted certain words for Aramaic words don't even come close. So Rukha de Kucha is the next one I'd like to talk about. And so that one was left in the original Aramaic, and if you're following us in the book, I'm on page 92. So we're looking at the concept of calling on Rukha de Kucha. These are the words that the Greeks translated as the Holy Spirit. It's got nothing whatsoever to do with the disembodied spirit being, but it actually talks about a feminine elemental force in us that, and this is kind of my short form of it, that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. So Rukha being a word in Aramaic that represents the elemental forces, the element of earth, air, fire, water. Rukha is a fifth force. And the Dekucha aspect relates to the word kosher in Aramaic, which means that which is proper, in this case for humans. So Rukha Dekucha, usually translated as the Holy Spirit, not because the literal meaning is not available, but because of the degree of confusion on the concept illustrated. The sound trigger is the action part of Allaha. So Allaha is the word that represents the Creator, and Rukha Dekucha speaks of the aspect of the Creator that moves in the world and must be worshipped, according to John 23:24. Worship means emulated. What's the energy that you need to emulate to be in resonance? When two energy fields are in tune or in harmony with each other, there's an exchange of energy between them. What do we need to be reached to in order to become a receiver for that energy of Rukha Dekucha? It is the quote-unquote Paraklita, which literally means she who breaks off the effects of errors and teaches the truth, and is to be also all-embracingly cherished and trusted. And then there's a quote from John 14:26. For she who breaks off the effects of doings which are unfit is Rukha Dekucha. She, my Abi being Father, will send through me. She will instruct you in all matters, and she will remind you all that I have said of you. If I want the energy of, let's say, 900 on my radio dial to come into my radio and become available to me through the speakers, what do I have to do? I have to tune my radio dial to 900. I can't be on 1350 and expect to listen to 900. And so there is an energetic pattern that emanates from the Creator that's called love. How am I going to receive the information from that? And if my mind is so dull to the presence of love, am I going to be able to hear its guidance or its direction? Am I going to benefit from the energy that will enter me if I don't make an effort to attune to it? And I would say that would be more in alignment with that idea of worship. So Rukha Dekucha is a feminine word, and the pronoun she was normally used to refer to her until the time of Constantine, when the church was massively reconfigured to support the imperial agenda of oppression and patriarchal superiority and control. The beauty and effectiveness of Rukha Dekucha is testified to by the very fact that while Constantine tried to pervert the church beyond recognition to oppress his people, and remember that Yeshua is the man that's called the Prince of Peace. He speaks about, the goal being to live in serenity, in alignment with love, whose source is love, whose father is love. And here's this guy who is out on the battlefield killing people one day and swears that he sees a cross with Yeshua on it, and therefore he's going to make his war plans Christian. It's like, what kind of transmutation is that? So with time, Rukha brought the church into triumph over oppression. Ancient symbolic pictures from Egypt, South America, and elsewhere depict the use or action of four elemental forces in the creation of the universe. Humanity, augmenting its senses with all manner of devices, has, as yet, been unable to sense or perceive any of these four forces. These forces are said to have been used with the action of Rukha Dekucha to create the physical universe and life. For instance, it is well known that the stars are expanding outward at tremendous velocities from a central point of beginning, despite billions of years of gravitational attraction opposing their outward rush. Some immense originating expulsive force was needed to initiate their outward journey. Humanity's created mind, using creative devices, has been unable to sense such uncreated but creative force. But we can observe by the fact that it exists, that it is there. And I'm just looking at, I've got some marks on here as though we had already covered this. Let me just look here. Yes, I think we have covered this. I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. So we'll just go to the conclusion of this section on Rukha to Kudsha. It now becomes a review. Let's go to the last paragraph or two on page 93 of that section. As Rukha to Kudsha represents Allah's, the creative forces, immeasurable force upon the mind of humanity and creation, a fourth force which humanity can receive into its nafsha, but cannot be perceived. The mind's not going to be able to generate direct information about this elemental force any more than it can create or it can directly sense what the wind is. The example that Yeshua used when he was talking about this force to one of the elders of the Jewish faith that had no clue what he was talking about. He says, "What, you don't know?" And then he uses the example of the wind. Well, you know by its effect it's been here, even though you can't see it directly. And so it is with Rukha, or I usually short form it to Rukha. And sometimes you'll notice in the book it's spelled R-O-O-K-H-A. The foundation's gone through a couple of permutations, and sometimes it's spelled R-U-K-H-A. So the Aramaic symbol Kudsha is the Aramaic ancestor of the Hebrew word kosher. And while kosher means proper, as delineated by the 5 books of Moses, Kudsha is broader and means proper as determined by and in harmony with the laws of the oneness for humanity, whether known or unknown. It represents that which is divinely intended for humanity. The Kudsha, Rukha to Kudsha, has many distinct but cooperative aspects which initiate a variety of actions. The actions are not Rukha to Kudsha, but rather a result of Rukha to Kudsha. These actions include life and communication from Allah to human intelligence. This latter action correlates with Carl Jung's universal conscience. Jung describes this as an all-pervasive web of interconnectedness between the divine and the worldly. Rukha to Kudsha functions as a transmitter and communicator of Allah's laws for humanity. John 14:26, she will instruct you in all matters, and she will bring to your minds that which I have said to you. You know, I think we could safely assume that Albert Einstein, when he said, if you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, he may have been attuned with and had that input because of his ability to attune to Rukha to Kudsha. And likely this place where he brought his higher levels of understanding that's prior to Einstein showing up with his mind, or, well, it just, you know, there was nothing that even came close. So you'll notice that in the step 6B, or pardon me, 5B of the worksheet, you know, the first part of the worksheet is placed to describe the construct of your mind, your perception. And then it moves into determining what's the goal that drives your perception. Then asking that love be present in you as you collapse the perception by canceling the goal that drives it. And then in 5B, there's a request. And when you think in terms of the generational patterns that we can tend to be stuck in, if I had mentioned yesterday, see, we all have known about or heard of or perhaps directly observed the young man who never knew anything about his father. His father was dead before he was ever born, and yet mannerisms, ways of speaking, right down to the way he held his face, showed up. It speaks of energetic patterns that go way beyond anything our senses can be aware of. And this indicates that there is an elemental force in us that can reach into that depth when relied on, when requested to assist. And like the wind, if you've never been out in it and somebody talks about the wind, you're going to go, well, what is that? Once you go out, you're going to have an experience of the effect of the wind. One who's never stopped to become aware of this elemental force in their lives or asked for support or assistance is going to be like someone who's lived their whole lives indoors. You speak of the wind, and what does it mean? What you'll notice as you do the worksheet process and invite that elemental force into activity is that there is a power in you that can reach so deeply into your family history, into your cultural history, so as to be able to undo those energetic patterns that come from being off base, off the mark in one's life. And so the idea of that step, and another way to understand Rukha Kucha when it comes to, gee, if I've got something that goes back 10 generations in my bloodline, how do I reach in? How do I undo that? So we could say in our more modern computer language, there is a super processor in us. We've got free will. It's never going to interfere with our free will. But when we're willing to work through something that perhaps is so big we can hardly fathom it, then what you do is you turn it over to Rukha Kucha. What does it sound like when you turn something over to Rukha Kucha? Here's what it sounds like. It is the breath. That's why so often you'll hear me as we're processing with someone, and I can sense the level of trauma that they're in. I'll ask the question, what's happening with your breath? And most of the time there'll be a little bit of a nervous laugh, and it's like, well, I wasn't breathing, or I'd radically altered my breathing pattern. When we withhold the breath from our physiology, we literally lock energy into tissues that do not belong into tissue that does not belong in tissue. And so you'll notice on the worksheet at several germane points where people are likely to hold their breath, there is the reminder to breathe. That's how it's turned over. Yes, there is a mental process of inviting, of asking for support. But if you ask for that support and you're not breathing, you're not likely to get much. And so there is this feminine, if I look at any given construct in my mind, let's say a construct that's based in some sort of fear or terror or rage or vengeance or what have you, in order to produce a construct as seemingly solid and massive as some people get trapped in, it takes a huge quantity of underlying energy, like huge, beyond what we could fathom. How do I handle that quantity or that level of energy? Within you, literally, there is a super processor. That when you allow your breath to move through your physiology, if there's something relative to this forgiveness process that you're engaged in that needs to be accessed, this elemental force can access it. And, ultimately, it's the core of our still point breathing process. And one of the most important tools that we teach. And the still point breathing process is something that I discovered about 42, 43 years ago, something in that range. And over the years, I've breathed thousands of people. And it doesn't matter what the trauma is that someone is experiencing. If they will turn it over fully to the breath will handle it. It is the super processor. And that's why you'll hear me over and over remind people to breathe. Or If somebody, challenges, brings something up for me, you'll hear me say, "Well, let me take a breath on that one." It is the prime mover within physiology. And you watch people when they're in trauma and they withhold their breath. And when you restore your breath fully to whatever the trauma energy is in you, and we could relate that to the Aramaic word sin, which is an archery term, which means off the mark. When you can take any energy that is off the mark in your physiology, and if you put an energy into your physiology that's off the mark, there's going to be pain. When you restore that energy to the breath, any pained aspect of it dissolves and dissipates. Hence, we have this feminine elemental force that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. Pretty profound to have that opportunity to the Aramaic and really understand what this man Yeshua was talking about when he spoke of this, and then to take it a step further and going into the Aramaic and recognize that it's not speaking about some, again, disembodied spirit creature, but it's rather speaking about your own breath. When if you go back to the creation story in Aramaic, it doesn't say that the Creator sent out its spirit. As the Greeks would tell us, it says the Creator sent out its breath. It's our direct link. It's our direct connection to the Creator. And that's why whatever you hold in you, whatever you need to work through, I'm going to invite you to step up to the plate and ask that elemental force to move in you and be willing to turn it over. Turning over of it is how you let loose of it. There is no trauma in human experience that if exposed to the breath will not dissolve. Just the way it works. So I hope that makes sense for everybody, and I'll just check in. Miss Jenny, is there anybody in the phone queue with a hand up? Anyone who has any thoughts or questions about that?
Unmute here.
Yay.
Yay. So there is a hand up, and I believe that it is Peter, 619. You're on the air. Welcome.
Hey, welcome, good sir. How do you be?
Great. Good morning. I had a question about something we had talked about before. That as you go through the worksheets, you're changing the energy inside of you, and then you're required to have a level of vitality to deal with it, because when the negative energy is released, it's a painful process. Yes?
Well,
no?
it can be. My offering would be that if there's some, and we can relate this to the breath, to Rukha to Kucha, if there's something painful that I access and I withdraw my breath, I'm holding my breath, I'm trying to avoid it, I'm trying to shut it down, I can prolong the pain of that. My experience has been, and I've watched hundreds and hundreds of people with like major, horrific traumas, and if they'll just fully restore the breath to that stuff can move in a fraction, in an instant. It's when literally the system is in a resistant state. In Aramaic, if you remember, the resistor is the definition of the word Satan. In Aramaic, Satan is not some dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. It's the resistor, one who misleads. And as long as somebody's holding on to the story their mind has to cover up their denial, cover up what they've dissociated from, then their pain and trauma is going to be reflected and stretched out. But if one is willing to just breathe into and through that, then what I've observed is it dissipates and disappears that fast. But we can prolong it if we resist and fight against it. Literally, I look back into my early training in physics and electronics, and what I see is literally when I'm in holding my breath, I create a literal resistor out of my tissue. And what a resistor does in a piece of electronic equipment is resist the flow of energy through it, cuts back the flow of energy through it. And to the degree that you cut it back, there's a direct relationship to how long it's going to move. If I allow myself to fully surrender to the breath, literally, physiologically, I go into a superconductor state. Now, it's not going to be easy to go into a superconductor state if what I do is eat all the junk food in the world. I, sip energy drinks all day, and then I do a fifth of scotch at night. Not going to be too easy to get into that superconductor state because physiologically my energy is going to be depleted. And I think we've shared before the idea of, if I'm at a level 5 vitality and I have a level 7 toxin in me, I can say to myself, oh, I want to work through this issue. I want to work through this issue. Rukha, help me work through this issue. But am I going to, move into a decent dietary regimen? No, I want my Cokes and I want my, butterscotch sundaes and I want my Doritos and I want my, Cheetos, junk oil, sugar, salt, everything that man has conceived of to drag down the vitality of a human being. So by doing that, I add to my resistance. So if I have this level 7 toxin and it were to break loose in me, literally, it could physically kill me. The toxic release from that. So I'm not going to tend to see that level 7. I'm not going to work through. I'll come back around to it, come back around to it, come back around. I'll say, gee, I've worked on this thing 50 times. Why am I not finished with it? Well, remember last week when it came up for you, and what did you do? Oh, I went and had a Coke. Oh, you just did some caffeine, some sugar, and some acid. How do you expect to have the vitality to detox something that deeply impactful unless you have the physiology able to do it? And so my level 7 toxin is not going to show up till I get to a level 7.5 vitality. And that's oftentimes why, and people will become frustrated because they're like, well, gee, I dealt with this issue 5 years ago. Well, yeah, you did. I remember that. You were at about a level 3 vitality, and you got this issue that's a level 9, and you went from a 3 to a 4, so you got to do a piece of work around that, but you haven't touched the 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 stuff yet, and you're not going to see the 9 until you get to a 9.5 vitality. So people tend to spiral around and back to those issues as they build vitality, and the more vital one is, if one opens an issue, the more rapidly physiology is going to be able to dissipate the energy and move through it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So it's delayed. You're not going to be able to release that negative energy if your body can't handle it. Then how do you die?
Well, that's what happens is people end up with, my offering would be the only reason we die. All death is suicide. You go back into the scriptures and they said, with man, death began. This energy field was designed to be eternal. The only thing that inhibits an integrated energy from staying integrated for eternity is the energy of it's eternal. The only thing that inhibits it from remaining eternal is if you put something in it that doesn't belong in it, that starts to disassemble it, starts to take it apart. So it begins to disintegrate. And death is a result of bringing energetic patterns into this structure that do not fit in or support or not designed for this structure that we call the body-mind unit. And that the word that describes taking that kind of energy into the system, again in the ancient Aramaic, is the word sin. what did they say? The wages of sin is death. I can remember thinking that was some kind of a theological threat. God's going to get me for my sins. No, that's not what it was. They were just telling you how physiology works. You put enough energy in that doesn't belong, and, you got a house, beautiful house, great, awesome shape, and you start filling it with cockroaches and mice, and, you drill a few holes in the roof, let some water in that doesn't belong. It's not going to be long before that house dissolves. Because now, on the other hand, if you only allow energies in to belong, you keep the air conditioning on, you keep the heat going, and the house will stand forever. And so each time we engage in an energy that creates deterioration, so if you engage in anything and you notice there's a deterioration of some aspect of the function of your body, then you know that you're engaging in sin. And what's the result of sin? The wages of sin is death. And again, it's about how physiology works. It's not about some kind of threat. It's not, sadly, churchianity has made it, God's going to get you for your sins. No. The Creator, the active presence of love that flows throughout the universe in which we live, move, and have our being is the space where everything that doesn't belong can be dissolved in an instant. But creative force gave us free will and said, anything you choose to hold on to, baby, it's yours. You want to bind it on earth, it's yours to bind on earth. You want to let go of it, and you can let go of it. But you can't have it both ways. You can't be a creator and then pretend somebody else is doing it to you. And so what the scripture, as I see it, when I look at it from the brain cells of physics, they were just saying, here's how your physiology works. And we'll tend to build vitality as we engage in more and more of the right energetic patterns, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, relational, nutritional, right down to the breath, right down to the quality of water that we drink. And so the more I engage in what is in harmony with and supports what it is that I'm using. There's an interesting story in the scriptures about the farmer who doesn't observe the laws of the land in terms of growing food. And they talk about, there'll be a man who'll have 10 wives, and they'll each bake him a loaf of bread, and he's going to starve to death. Why did he starve to death? He had all that bread. His belly was full. Why did he starve to death? Oh, well, they explained just before that they didn't understand how to keep the fields properly so that the fields yielded wheat that gave the man nutrition. So when they violated the land laws, the man died. Anywhere the energetic laws are violated, if we're not, like something I've really been tapping into since we started gardening here, since we kind of settled here in Virginia. And I've realized that you can't grow food on dirt, that you have to have soil. And most people don't even know there's a difference. But if you go to the big grocery store and you look in the, regularly grown food department, if you went back to the farm that grew the foods, or actually it maybe shouldn't even be called a farm, maybe should be called a manufacturing facility, what you'll find is they start out by pouring 10 gallons of glyphosate, a carcinogenic poison, onto the land that kills absolutely everything in the land, makes it totally, completely sterile. And then they plant a seed, and then they sell that same farmer chemicals to put some available nutrient into the soil so that the plant can grow. If there is no life in the soil, the nutrients are not yielded up. The nutrients that the seed needs to grow come from the activity of the microlife in the soil. And if you kill all of that, then you get to sell that farmer chemicals to give it something to grow on, and then you get to sell that farmer, toxic sprays to kill the bugs that are going to come and eat the weak and dying food that comes out, the so-called food that comes out of the ground, and then it ends up in the grocery store. dead. I mean, it's like trying to get life from death. Poor glyphosate kills everything. Now let's grow something alive. I mean, that's just silly on its face. The energy isn't there. And so in each arena, when they told us to be holy, my offering would be, they weren't talking about being down on your knees with your hands folded. They were saying, understand every level of energy that you're engaged in, whether it's nutritional or what you do with your mind, what you do with your emotion, what you do with your spoon, whatever it is, that you understand on all levels what energies are appropriate to give you the highest levels of vitality, and then engage in it. And anything that doesn't, you forgive, you let loose of. If there's hate, fear, rage, guilt, pain, drama, trauma, it's a signal that doesn't belong in the human system. It's disintegrative and ultimately is what kills us. So am I willing to face, like for me, and I shared this with you the other day, a long time ago I started to make the request, recognizing that, you and I and everybody we know, everybody in our ancestry over 120 is dead. So we now know by observing that the frequency of death, the energetic patterns that will lead us to death are already in our genes. And for me, one of my requests is I ask to be shown every energy of that killed every person in my bloodline who has ever gone before me. I've asked to be shown that and supported in understanding how to work through it, how to remove it from the structure so that I can return to a normal human lifespan, which is eternal. And to me, that's the ultimate outcome of this work. If you listen to Yeshua in Revelations, he talks about this exact principle. He says, to he that overcomes, and what are we talking about overcoming? Overcoming the taste for, the attraction to, hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, sugar, junk food, what have you. To he that overcomes, he will not taste of the second death. Well, when they talk about the second death, what's the first death? The first death is when we lose awareness that we are designed to be originators of our lives, and we are beings created of active present love, designed to work upon this physiological system called the body-mind unit. When we lose awareness of that, and we're raised in a culture that knocks the awareness of the presence of love out of us, which our culture is expert at that, and then fills our minds with information, and we spend our whole lives being run by the information in our minds, we're not actually alive, we're simply automatons running out the programs that are in the structure. But to really truly wake up to who we are and to begin to function in our capacity to originate means we're alive. So that's when why they talked about being reborn. You need to wake up. You need to open to who you are rather than just running on in automaton status. And then if you overcome what's killed everybody in your bloodline, what he said is, will not taste of the second death, will become a pillar, which obviously is a fixture, in the temple, which is what, the body-mind unit, and shall go out no more. In other words, we're going to stop killing ourselves. So with man, death began. What Yeshua showed was a system of working through everything that we've learned to kill ourselves with, and to harmonize with those energies that are kosher, kudsha, those that are in alignment, that are designed for humans. I can only, in terms of generational patterns that have created death, I can only reach into a depth that is I can't reach any deeper depth than the height of aliveness and vitality which I have. And each time I reach a new level of vitality, I'm going to be able to reach a new depth, which means I'm going to go through the next healing crisis. And, I don't know if you remember when that intensive you were at way back 30 years ago, but it's often quite funny at an intensive because, people get together and, maybe they're doing a whole summer at Heartland or something. And over that period of time, it'll kind of become a joke because everybody will go, uh-oh, look at Bill. Bill's rocking. He's just hit a new level of vitality. Everybody get ready for the crash that's going to come, for the next healing opportunity he's going to get to throw off what his new level of vitality is going to show him. So it kind of becomes, it becomes so obvious when one reaches that new level of vitality. It's like, okay, so the next layer is going to come. Great. Let's stand as a space of support for working through it. Instead of what most people want to do when that next level comes up is they unconsciously are driven to go back to whatever they use to keep that energy in abeyance, to keep it out of view. And so, of course, that's where willingness comes in. I'm willing to go through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing. And am I willing to do it using only that which is kosher, which is appropriate for this human energy system? Whether it's the quality of water that I drink, the quality of food that I eat, the quality of thoughts that I think, the creative process I engage in. And the breath that I breathe. Are you breathing?
Yes.
Awesome. Does that all fit for what you're looking for in the way of information?
Yes, it makes total sense for me. I have type 2 diabetes onset. Somebody wrote something on the comment of, nature loads the gun, we pull the trigger. I pulled the trigger, and I know it.
Yeah, we loaded the gun. Nature didn't do it.
No, I know.
The mind of man always wants somebody to blame. Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm tracking you. I was just mentioning that we have a choice in this. So,
yes.
I went to my massage therapist yesterday. I met her yesterday, I should say that. A wonderful person, and we were talking, and her 13-year-old son has type 1 diabetes, and he's on medicine, and she's pursuing every holistic homeopathic path. However, she needs to keep him alive, of course. So my question is,
right.
I know what happened to me, pretty much. What happened to him? Why did that kid get this at 13? He wasn't out there drinking Chardonnay.
Yeah. Well, was he born with diabetes?
Yes, type 1.
Okay. So then, what kind of influences came from his parents? What kind of, the energy that tends to associate with diabetes is unresolved grief. That's where the energy that tends to gravitate toward the pancreas and create its dysfunction. So when one doesn't deal with grief, it tends to create a dysfunction in the pancreas. When one resolves their grief, the load is taken off the pancreas tends to go back into action. I don't know if it happened to be, I don't remember which year you were at Heartland, but way back about the time you were there was a woman who was, and I know you were only there for a 9-day if I remember correctly, but there was a woman who was on the support team for a full year, and when she first came to Heartland, she was, it actually became she became sort of the object of a bit of a joke, and that was that if she started to get bitchy, you went and got her food right away, because she had a really heavy-duty blood sugar problem, and if she didn't eat and her blood sugar dropped, she became like, the vampire, type of thing. And everybody on the support team knew, if that starts, get her food in a hurry, or you want to get out of the room. And I can remember the day she did a still point session. This was about maybe 3 months into being there, and in the still point session, she got in touch with the fact that the man that she had married, who was the love of her life, was in a car accident and was given tainted blood and got AIDS and died. And when she touched directly into the trauma in her body about that whole syndrome just disappeared. She could fast with everybody else. It didn't matter whether she ate or she didn't. That, drop in blood sugar that created a mental change in her just didn't happen anymore. That same year, we actually had a man who had been on insulin since he was a child, and this guy, I forget now exactly, but he was an older gentleman, in his maybe 70s at that point, 60s, 70s, and he dropped his insulin while he was there after dealing with some grief issues. So you might expect and you might ask Rukha, so what's the grief I need to deal with to lift this energy off of my pancreas? And I'm willing to look at it. I'm willing to deal with it. And then if it starts to move, make sure you keep on track with doing the right things. Remember the questions you ask yourself if I'm in a healing process or a disease process. When I become symptomatic, I ask myself, 1, have I been doing more and more of the right things? If the answer is yes, that's check 1. This is a healing process. Now that I'm symptomatic. 2, just before this happened, I hit a new level of vitality. Oh, yeah, last night, man, I was flying high. I was just, right on top of the world. Great. 3, am I experiencing some old symptoms? And as I start to look at, so I've reached this level of vitality where I can now capture this hidden energy that I haven't been dealing with, and now I'm able to work through it. So then willingness becomes the thing that needs to be applied. And then the 4th thing you do is you make sure that you keep doing the right things. Because oftentimes when people go into it, they're doing the right things, everything's in line, and bang, that healing process hits, and then they run out and, they junk out. I remember we had a medical doctor who was at Heartland one year, and why he did this, I don't know why. I remember he was in the cabin Peace, if you remember which cabin that is, right across from the Heart Center. And rather than go out the front door of the cabin to get in his car to go to town to get a burger, he was in a healing crisis. He literally climbed out the window of his bedroom to go and get in his car, and he went off to town to get some junk food. And it's amazing how driven, and of course, once you become conscious of it, you go, actually, I think I'll stay in willingness and let my need for that go. Instead of using that suppressor, I'm going to just stay with it and let myself feel this fully and let myself process through it. There's a really good video that you might find helpful to watch. Anybody who's listening, this conversation is in line with your thinking or where you're heading with your work. If you look on Amazon, I know over the years I bought a couple of copies of it. It was like it was made several years ago. It was $5 or $6. It's called "May I Be Frank," and it really is a powerful demonstration of what the healing process looks like. And it's a true story. There's a restaurant out your way called the let's see, what is it?
Cafe Gratitude.
Cafe Gratitude. And they ask you when you go into Cafe Gratitude, the greeter will greet you and say, what are you grateful for? Or what do you want? There's a question of the day. And this particular day, 2 of the young people who worked there, one of them was the son of the owner of the restaurant, had this rather rotund New Jersey tough guy Italian come in to the restaurant. And their question was, what are you willing to have in your life? What do you want in your life? And they describe how this guy went into tears, and he's like, I would love to be loved again, but I'm so fat and ugly that nobody could ever love me. And the young man whose dad owns the restaurant, he goes back and says, Dad, whatever the other guy's name is, we want to take this guy on and help him, support him. And they end up making him an offer that if he'll do what they tell him to do, they'll support him through his healing process. And they sign a contract with him. He signs that he will not eat anything that they don't feed him from Cafe Gratitude. The 2 guys go into his home or his apartment, in his kitchen. They go through all of his cupboards and his refrigerator, and they remove everything that is a drug that he treats as food, but is really a drug. I mean, they remove the food from his freezer, from his refrigerator, from his cupboards. And there's a particularly poignant scene in it where one of the things he wants to do is clean up the relationship that he had with his former wife, who was his childhood sweetheart, that he still dearly cared for, had too much trauma to stay together. And his daughter, he'd lost relationship with his daughter, and he wanted a relationship back with his daughter. And these two kids, they've gone out and gotten themselves a camera, and they've decided to turn this into a documentary, May I Be Frank? And they're sitting in his living room, the four of them, or the five of them, and they're going back and forth processing things, and these two kids are facilitating, he with his former wife and his daughter. And I don't remember what the issue was, but something his wife says just triggers him into a rage. And you just watch him. He gets, I mean, just like unconscious automatic behavior. He gets up off the couch, he walks into the kitchen and opens the refrigerator looking for a drug. And he closes the refrigerator because he remembers there are no drugs left in there. But it shows what kind of things people are going to have to go through. It's a very powerful documentary on this guy's healing process and what we're going to have to go through in order to get out of the world of unconsciousness and really truly become conscious again and function as true human beings. May I be frank? So it's worth spending a few bucks to buy that, or I don't know. There may be somewhere nowadays where it's online too. You might be able to.
While you were talking, I looked it up on my Apple TV, and it's in there. I'm not sure what program it is, but it's online. So I found it.
Cool.
Sick, depressed, overweight, 50-year-old Frank Ferrante. Yep. Cool.
Oh, he's a fellow countryman. Oh, it's on. If you've got Prime, it's on Prime Video. It's on Freevee with ads. I'm looking at that now, and it's on Prime Video. It looks like, or maybe it's just Freevee.
Okay. Yeah, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
I might watch it with my wife. We'll see what happens. But anyway, thank you.
Well, it'd be worth looking at because you just get a bird's eye view of what this guy has to go through and he ends up, back in a pretty fit place, and it takes you through the challenges he has in doing it.
Mhm. Okay.
So hold space for you guys to watch that.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Well, any other thoughts for you today, sir?
No, that's good. That was my main question.
Awesome. All right. Holding space, my friend.
Thank you.
Blessings. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, Miss Jeannie, we're down to about 10 minutes. Any thoughts for you, or do we have anybody else in the phone queue with a hand up? Anything happening in the chat room? If you're out there in listener land and you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our calling number is 563-999-3581. Call that number. You're listening to the show. And then if you push 1, that puts you in phone queue to ask a question, and Jeannie will greet you by your number and introduce you.
We're actually down to about 6.5 minutes, so we've got time for a quick question. Somebody press 1.
Not everybody at once, though. Please. Okay, well, if nobody has a question, instead of getting into another topic.
We actually had a hand just go up.
Oh, great.
Believe it is Anne, so welcome, Anne.
Welcome, dear lady. How are you?
Hey, good. So I just caught probably the last 20 minutes of the gentleman you were talking with, but I got the gist of what you were saying. So the one question I have that adds to that, when you were talking about the junk food and all the other things that influence us to be sinking into our old patterns and thoughts. So what about sleep? Would it be the same thing? Sleep deprivation would react in our body the similar way?
Anything that the structure needs whether it's nutrition, and you could look at sleep as a nutrient, because if we're deficient in sleep, the structure cannot process energy properly. So avoiding, and I think many people have trouble sleeping or avoid sleep because they're unconscious dynamics that they just are unwilling to look at in their lives.
Right, right. Because I've been noticing that if, like, I can be all, up and on track with just, all the tools and doing the right things, but then if I wake up and I have not slept well or got enough sleep, then it's like the negative just is there. And it's like as soon as I get up, get my morning drink, and then get some food in me, that's healthy. It's almost like I can just feel the energy change. So, okay, that just confirms that's what I was thinking. I guess it was hard to believe that something like that could be so powerful to make a difference.
Oh,
it's not
2,000%. I mean,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the brain cannot eliminate wastes properly without enough sleep. Basically the brain, and using it as a metaphor, has to take a bowel movement to stay functional. And there are certain cells in the brain that have to turn their function a certain way in order to create that elimination. And it takes about 7 hours of sleep for the brain to do that, to literally eliminate what doesn't belong. The glial cells
so that's
to eliminate.
The 7 hours. Yeah, no. Okay, again, because, all right. Okay.
And if you're finding that when you wake up and it takes food to get you on track, then you might start to look at your blood sugar and what's happening with blood sugar. Because you should be able to get up in the morning and, unless you've got a challenge with blood sugar and the pancreas, you shouldn't need to, run and grab food in order to be balanced. So you might take a look at that. Something else, too, that they're recognizing, or at least some medical doctors are calling, I don't know if it's become consensus yet, but they're calling it type 3 diabetes. And type 3 diabetes expresses as things like memory loss, brain dysfunction, Alzheimer's, that sort of thing. And what happens is that what they've discovered is that there's no insulin in the brain. And so the brain cell, in order to get insulin into a cell, you have to have sugar. That's what carries the insulin, or pardon me, you have to have insulin to get the sugar into the cell to function as a nutrient that the cell can function on. But if there is no insulin, then the sugar doesn't get into the brain cell and the brain starts to dysfunction. And there is a product, and if you'd like, I'll send you a link to the one that we use. You can buy a 2-pound container of it. I think it's $38 on Amazon. It's called MCT oil powder. And it's short-chain fatty acids that the body can use without any insulin, can use it for fuel. So any kind of sugar difficulties, that MCT oil powder can be helpful in order to keep especially the brain functioning. And throughout the body, the cell can use it without insulin. And so that might be something to start to just supplement. I mean, we use it. We've got we always have a container on the shelf and we put it in our tea, or just we use it prophylactically. And where we discovered, I was doing some research when Jeannie's dad had Alzheimer's, quote unquote, and he got to the point where he could hardly play dominoes with us, and we put him on that MCT oil powder, and within less than 2 weeks, he was beating us at dominoes again. So it's a cheap prophylactic.
I forgot about that. I remember, now that you're saying that. Okay, yeah. Can you just put it in the notes for today, and I can click on it?
Yeah.
It's in there.
Oh,
cool.
Of course it is. Perfect. Yeah. I'll click on it this time. I found a note about it, and then I go, but then I didn't follow up, so there you go. That's the answer to my little note I found. Okay.
There you go.
All the words to it. Okay, perfect. All right, thanks, guys. Blessings.
All right, blessings. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It is an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye-bye.